Great. So yeah, as I say, we're going to be. I wanted to sort of look at this phrase, "May you be happy." It might just seem like a kind of completely obvious part of the meditation, but I wanted to sort of explore it a little bit and share with you some of the ways that I've been working in the meditation with that. So when I was thinking about this, I was remembering something that I not infrequently hear, which is that people say, often when they meditate, actually, they say, I thought I was happier than I was. I sort of thought I was quite happy. And then I started meditating. I realized I wasn't quite as happy as I thought I was. I've heard that a number of times. And you might blame the meditation, you might think something going wrong, but I don't think it's that. But isn't it interesting that we can think we're happy and then find out that we're not quite as happy as we thought we were. I find that says something really interesting about happiness, because you'd sort of think that happiness is a really immediate thing. You know when you're happy and when you're not happy, because it's kind of completely immediate. It's not just an idea, is it? But it seems that it's a bit more complicated than that. And I think what this is really about is that in a way, we get into a sort of story of happiness. We get into a story of our lives, and I think we do this because really we inevitably kind of look for a strategy for happiness. Happiness is of immediate importance to us, sort of non-negotiable importance as a human being. But then we kind of step into, well, what's going to make me happy? We step into sort of strategy of happiness. And often we're more focused on the strategy, or at least on the story, which is really just a sort of narration of our strategy to be happy, excuse me. I think it will become more clear why I'm going into this in a moment, but just sort of stay with me for now. Yeah, it's a bit like we get caught up in well, these things are going to make me happy. You know, I've got the perfect job, I've got the perfect partner, or you know, we may not be quite as grandiose as that. I've got a good job, I've got a lovely partner, something like that. Therefore, I'm happy. So we kind of stay. Do you see what I mean? We sort of make a story out of our strategies for happiness. We sort of believe that these things will make us happy. And then we're more focused on the story. Well, I've got these things, so I must be happy. And in that way, we get divorced, or we don't notice the actual feeling of happiness. We're more focused on the sort of story of happiness, sort of narration of our strategy for happiness. And I think it's in that way that we sort of get a bit of a disconnect. And the reason why I think this is really important in the practice is because actually, if we wish ourselves a story of happiness, it's not really going to work. It's not really going to engage us. So what we need to do is we need to come into the much more direct experience of whether we're happy or not. And I think this is valuable to do on its own terms. But I think one of the things that I notice in doing this is that sometimes I'm not as happy as I think I might be. But actually, that's all right. That's not kind of problematic. We're not in the practice trying to make ourselves happy. That's not actually going to help. In fact, it will probably make you feel a bit worse. What we are trying to do is we're trying to tune in to this, the urgency of this human need, almost problem. We're sort of charged as human beings with this problem of happiness. That's perhaps a bit of a funny way of putting it, you might think. But what I mean is we can't get away from it. In a way, our life would be a bit simpler, wouldn't it? If we didn't have to worry about being happy, we could just get on with our job and we wouldn't fall out with people because they would make us unhappy, and it would be quite kind of straightforward. And but it's not like that. We've got our life, but then we also want to be happy, and that sort of causes us a certain sort of problem in a way. But yes, I think what we're doing, particularly in the first stage of the Metta Bhavana, is just really tuning in to the sort of urgency, the urge to happiness. We can't sort of escape it. And if we're feeling slightly unhappy, well, that's really good, actually. We can kind of tune into that, because that is an experience of the sort of urgency of happiness. We're trying to sort of develop a sensitivity to that, almost a sort of tenderness to that. And then because we've got a sensitivity to that, we can develop this attitude of metta towards it. So I think that's the way I'm going to suggest we try and work in the practice. We're developing a kind of sensitivity to the sort of urge and urgency of the issue of happiness. And out of that sensitivity, it's easier to sort of wish ourselves well. And I'd include in this that sometimes sometimes the first stage can kind of can be a bit problematic. Sometimes we can kind of encounter feelings of sort of I'm not, you know, I'm sort of unworthy of being happy or something like that. I think one way of sort of working with those things is not worrying, not sort of dramatizing those sorts of things coming up, because in a certain way they can be of a piece with this urge for happiness, in the sense that often those sorts of things we can sort of experience happiness as a slight sort of threatening thing. I'm not sure I'm worthy of happiness. It sort of doesn't fit in with my view of myself. Well, that whole sort of view of yourself is there to sort of not necessarily give you happiness, because clearly it doesn't, but at least a sort of sense of security. And it's being threatened by this notion of happiness. Well, I'm not sure that I could be like that. So can you see how that's still, we can develop a sort of a softness, a tenderness to that. It's still sort of linked to this sort of self-cherishing, wanting to sort of look after oneself. So perhaps that's one way that we can work, even with sort of slightly difficult responses to our own happiness. I'll say one more thing about happiness, actually, and that is that that somehow happiness, I think, for us in the West, can get entwined with success. I think that's how we can get into a sort of story of happiness. Well, I should be happy because I'm a success, and if I'm not happy, then I'm not a success. It's sort of stigmatized, isn't it? It's sort of a comment on you as a human being. But I don't think that's very. I think that's perhaps a particularly sort of Western thing. I say that because I know a number of Indians who've got a much more immediate relationship with sort of happiness and suffering, much more straightforward for them to say, "Oh no, I've had a really difficult time." It's not got sort of stigma. Anyway, we should just be careful of that sort of story. So when we're tuning in to this more immediate sense, felt sense in the body of whether we're happy or whether we're not, we can be sort of watching out for any sort of overlaid stories of, oh, I'm not happy, that means I'm not a success or something like that. They're just sort of, they are just stories. In reality, it's impossible for us to be happy all the time. So how could that be a valid sort of rate of our success as a human being? I know many successful people are not necessarily happy. Many happy people are not necessarily successful. So anyway, so this is working in the first stage. And then, of course, what we do in the Metta Bhavana is we expand out, don't we? Move into the second stage, wishing happiness for our good friend. Third stage, neutral person. Fourth stage, difficult person. Then expanding out. So this is really integral to the practice. This sort of expanding out, it's reflected in the title. How can I be happy, or how can we be happy? Which should we be asking, sort of thing. So what I wanted to just say about this is that in a way, the sort of asking the question or having the attitude, how can I be happy? Well, it turns happiness into a sort of, we sort of stand in conflict in a way with other people's happiness. At some stage, our happiness is going to be sort of impinged upon by some other human being pursuing their happiness. So happiness is sort of problematic in that sense as well. People do things which upset and harm other people for their own happiness. So we can't just leave it at wishing ourselves to be happy. We can't just have a first stage, but the first stage is really, really important. Yeah, I was thinking of the example of the noisy neighbour who enjoys their music up loud. That's what brings them happiness, having the freedom to be able to do that. However, that does not bring happiness for their neighbours. It's sort of kind of obvious example. So, yeah, this looking in terms of how can I be happy it's a sort of urgent, sort of weighty matter for us, a matter of weight for each individual. But it brings us into conflict with other people, which is why we're not focused just on making ourselves happy. We're expanding out to ask, how can we be happy? So just in terms of a strategy, if you see what I mean, it's much more likely of success, because one of the things that's really, really important to us as human beings is connection. If our main priority of happiness brings us into conflict with other people, it's very, very uncomfortable, very painful, very frustrating, sort of distressing for us. If instead we can ask, how can we be happy? We can move beyond that sort of immediate competition to cooperating. It brings us into connection, and there are all sorts of opportunities that stem from that. I'm just thinking about the British as compared with the Spanish and the Italians. The British, well, Spanish and Italians do all these gregarious things to kind of connect, aren't they? Singing from their balconies. I believe the British bake. That's what I've been doing. I've been baking hot cross buns for people. So as a strategy, it's much more successful. But also, the attitude of how can we be happy is a more how could you put it? It's more conducive to happiness. What I mean by that is I was really, really busy recently. The end of that business, you kind of want a bit of time off. You want a bit of me time, don't you? In that state of kind of me time, looking for me time, actually, I found I was sort of grabbing at things. I sort of, well, maybe I could watch a bit of TV to wind down. That sort of grabby state, looking after me, is itself sort of unpleasant. It's not sort of restful. I couldn't sort of grab happiness with it. That was when I started baking. Instead, I did something for others. That was the sort of most refreshing and sort of led to a greater sense of ease and well-being. So not only the strategy is more helpful, but actually the attitude itself is a more sort of pleasing, a happier sort of, more conducive to happiness. So what we're going to do in the practice is just focus in on this area of kind of happiness, see if we can develop this tenderness to happiness so that we can develop, extend that sensitivity to happiness out to other people. So if you'd like to get into your, set up your cushions and get on your cushions, then I'll start leading us through the meditation now. So I'm going to lead us through the Metta Bhavana. So make sure you're comfortable on your cushions. So comfortable, so you've got a solid or a stable foundation, and then also an alert, a sense of alertness. Alertness of posture leads to alertness of mind. So an alertness in the torso, chin gently tucked in the head, the crown of the head extending up as though being lifted by thread. And then when you're ready, closing your eyes for this period of meditation. And we're going to do just, instead of the full 5 stages, we'll just do 3 or 4 stages. So as you close your eyes, just letting your experience emerge into your awareness. Notice sensations of the body, how they become more apparent to our awareness when we close our eyes. Feeling the contact with the ground. And see if you can just let the ground support you. Hard, we can be subtly supporting ourselves. We don't need to. Just let the ground support you. And then allowing into your awareness any sense of your mental weather. What's the sort of meteorology of your thoughts? The gusty, distracted thoughts, or quite calm? Just let that be there. This stage, we've got this opportunity just to become aware of our experience as it is, not judging it. And if we are judging it, not judging that. Just developing a good-humoured tenderness towards our experience. And now particularly becoming aware of the sensations in the center of the torso, the center of the chest, the heart center, just sort of letting our awareness accumulate, gather in the center of the body as we breathe in and breathe out. Resting our attention in those sensations. And cultivating or having a tender attitude towards in our awareness of this area. And we can just see where we are on the happiness scale, as it were. Just having a sort of feeling for tenderness towards sort of urge, this very immediate urge, desire for happiness. So just being patient with that. Developing this sort of tender, patient attitude. Listening to the heart. This is all we're going to do, just listening in to the heart. So if it's a bit dull, flat, we're just listening into that. What does that feel like? Often with dullness, there's a sort of urge for it to be different. We're just having a tenderness towards that. Whatever's going on, just seeing if we can tend to it with this attention infused with tenderness, patience. In this way, sensitizing our awareness to the sort of urge, human urge to be happy in direct experience. And if you notice any stories, just letting them be there, not pushing them away. And come back to that later. Patiently, tenderly aware of the sensation in the heart center. And then once you've got a sense of that, just seeing if there is a response to it, a responsiveness of well-wishing. You can just in a very heartfelt kind of way, drop in the phrase, may I be well. May I be happy. And at this stage, our attention is with the wish, the wishing, the attitude in response to our happiness or unhappiness. If you can stay with any response of well-wishing, so here we've moved our attention from the feelings of happiness or unhappiness to the wish or response to that experience. And this is cultivating metta, this attitude of metta. And now bring into mind a good friend. So giving them time to arrive in your mind, into your mind. staying aware of your heart center. And what it feels like to be in the presence of your friend. And then see if we can get a sense of their urge to be happy, a sense of the urgency of that matter for them. We know that it's an urgent matter for them, but we're developing a sensitivity to it, a responsiveness. And becoming aware of any response in the heart of well-wishing, of metta. And all we need to do is give our attention to that response, that attitude of metta, of well-wishing. And you may very gently use the phrases, not from the head, but from the heart, as it were. And now in the third stage, call into mind a neutral person, someone who we may see quite regularly, we may work with, even we don't have any strong feelings for. And again, giving time for them to arrive into our minds, to bring them into our minds. Becoming aware of what it feels like to have them here with us. And then extending this sensitivity towards them. And this matter of human happiness, ways for them to like it weighs for us. If we can be sensitive to our own urge for happiness, we can be more sensitive to that for others. In this way, we're starting to ask, how can we be happy? Which in turn helps us with our own happiness. And now in the last stage, bring into mind all previous stages, our friend, the neutral person, and ourself, and seeing if we can have this attitude of concern for how we can be happy, this more even, more equal, well-wishing, and then we can extend this attitude out to become aware of more and more people who are here at meditation night. If you know them, expanding out this feeling for a sort of urgent weight of happiness, knowing that we can't all be happy all the time, and therefore the matter weighs for all of us. And now as we come to the end of the practice, just dropping any effort that you're making, really important in this stage of the practice, just sit and see what happens in the mind when you stop making effort. And then when I ring a bell, adjusting back out of meditation, first becoming aware of the sounds around you, any people around you, space you're in. And when you're ready, opening your eyes. So giving yourself a little moment to transition out of meditation. And then we've got this opportunity now just to explore anything that's come out of that. So we can do this just by the chat box, just putting any questions into the chat box. It'd be very interesting to know how you got on with that meditation, if you found that helpful. So we'll see if there's any questions come out. If not, that's fine. We'll be able to move on and let you know what's coming up. Yeah, but yeah, very interesting to hear how you hear about your experience of the sit of this approach. And Vidyasaki here on our team will moderate any questions coming in.
Well, there is a comment here from, it's either Amy or Kieran.
Oh yeah.
The feeling of wanting happiness eventually came quite tangible, which was a first. Yeah, and I've sort of really connected with the poignancy of that desire to be happy. It's quite, yeah, it's quite sort of striking for me.
Yeah, is that Amy talking about poignancy, or is that you?
That was me. But I think it's a similar thing. This feeling of wanting happiness eventually became quite tangible.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, no, that's similar to what I found as well, and I find it surprising that if I just sort of, may I be well, may I be happy, may I be well, may I be happy, I'm wishing myself something that I'm not very sort of tuned up to. Actually, I can feel sort of slightly numb because I haven't actually really done the work of sensitizing myself to that. So what you say about poignancy and what Kieran or Anna was saying, Amy, sorry, was saying, yes, I find that very true. It's interesting, isn't it, to see that emerge in our experience, to see that sort of under the surface, it really matters to us. It matters at an immediate sort of moment by moment level. But we're sort of slightly sort of numbed to it, and if we stay with that sort of numbness, actually we sort of numb ourselves to other people's happiness, and I think that's why this area of happiness is so important. Actually, happiness is really, really important to all of us. In a way, suffering is just the flip side of happiness. That's a really, really obvious statement, isn't it? I think we don't always sort of notice that. So I've been finding, just as I can sensitize myself to happiness, my sensitivity to suffering is sort of in a way the same sensitizing to me. I really like what Vidyasaki said about poignancy. There is something poignant about it, isn't there? That we're all, that's what's sort of driving all of us, and that's why this is such an important reflection. Because we come back to something really, really essential to everybody. This sort of urge, thirst. That's really good. That was Kieran and Amy, wasn't it? I really like that sort of thirst. It's so visceral. It's a sort of thirst to be happy. And of course, we all, run around following certain strategies for that. Some of them very unhelpful to us and other people. but we can still relate to people in this more essential way, relating to this thirst for happiness that we can't escape. That's what's so poignant about it, isn't it? We can't escape that thirst, and it's in that way I'm saying we're sort of charged with a human problem. Yeah, or as humans charged with the problem of happiness, this sort of poignant kind of problem. Yeah, so no, I think that's really good what both Vidyasaki and Amy and Kieran have said there.
There is another interesting question.
Great, what's that?
Oh, yeah, sorry. From Mona.
Mona, oh yeah, hi Mona.
This is an interesting question. Do we need to feel the metta as a physical sensation, or will that come with practice?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Mona. Yeah, because sometimes the physical element or component of metta is very, very subtle. It's quite it's very subtle. It's almost easy to miss it sometimes, to feel that you're not feeling anything. So yeah, I think in a way it's not important to be feeling lots. It's more important if we are sort of engaged in this movement in the heart of responsiveness to somebody else or to ourselves. Sometimes for me that is just a sort of subtle sense of flow in the sort of movement in the heart, but there's not a lot of sort of feeling content, and that's fine. We don't need to be feeling bucket loads. It's more that there is this movement, this attitude of kind of well-wishing. If we're quietly engaged in the practice, so if you're able to sit there and just say maybe well, maybe happy, you're not sort of going off, getting distracted, well, there's probably metta going on. It may not have a very strong feeling content, but because you're engaged, you're concerned for that person's happiness. If you're not engaged and you're kind of getting distracted, well, maybe there's you need to kind of get engaged. But if you are engaged, that will mean most likely that you're engaged with well-wishing, and that may not have very much feeling content. Yeah, it's a very interesting, important question actually, Mona, because it's very easy for us to say, oh, I sat down, I didn't feel anything. And that's a sort of, we write off our efforts to meditate when we do that. Sometimes we don't have a strong feeling to people, do we? But we're actually acting kindly. Sometimes we have a strong feeling to them, but it's more about us than it is about them. Well, that's not this attitude of well-wishing. So yeah, really, really, really important question. Thanks, Mona. I hope that's helpful for you. So I think we can have the courage, if we're quietly engaged, we'll just stay with it. It might be that more feeling sort of comes with that as the sort of momentum of that attitude of metta increases. Yeah, thanks. Have we any more questions at this stage for you, Saki?
There is one more question. From Untie the String Natural Healing.
Right.
I found myself seeing the person walking along with me and smiling. I enjoyed that part, but I think that is because that would make me happy to be smiled at. So in wishing her well, I found happiness.
Yeah. In wishing, would you like to just read that again, Vidyasaki?
Yeah, I found myself seeing the person walking along with me and smiling. I enjoyed that part, but I think that is because that would make me happy to be smiled at. So in wishing her well, I found happiness.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Really interesting question as well. It's interesting, isn't it? I think there's two elements to that. One is the enjoyment of someone else's happiness. Um, there's a particular Sanskrit word for that, and then the other is it sort of lifts us to be around happy people. Yeah, so I don't know which one was going on for you. Or it could be a mixture of both. I think often it probably is. But the first one, this enjoying the happiness of other people, the metta is part of a set of 4 meditations. One on compassion, one is metta, which is the sort of fundamental practice. Another one is called mudita, which is where we cultivate this sort of taking delight in the good qualities and happiness of other people. So that's a sort of particular flavour, if you like, of this broad area of positive emotion, outgoing emotion. So it may be that there was some of that kind of going on. You were just sort of delighted in their happiness, their good qualities, and I think that's really quite a positive thing. I think there's also sort of perhaps yeah, the fact that just to see other people happy can be a bit of a relief, as perhaps seeing people who are suffering is a bit harder. But metta can kind of metta can hold both. Metta can sometimes it is a bit easier, isn't it, being around happy people most of the time. Sometimes a bit challenging, perhaps, if we're in a mood. Yeah, metta is the sort of, it's the wishing, this attitude of wishing people to be well, whether they're well or not. So it's slightly different from enjoying people being happy. Do you see what I mean? We can actually sort of wish someone well, even though they're not well, and metta kind of continues to flow towards them. Or if they are well, then metta continues to flow toward them. So it's important that we're sort of focused on this attitude of metta, rather than our own happiness. Not that there's a problem with being happy in someone else's happiness, but metta can go beyond that. It can reach beyond that and wish people well when they're not happy. Yeah, so I hope that's helpful, just to sort of draw that distinction out between just being happy that someone else is happy and having metta for someone else who is happy. Perhaps a bit of a long answer, but I hope that's helpful. Great. Well, that's all we've got time for this evening. So next week we'll be back looking at the Metta group, the mindfulness of breathing. So I hope that was all helpful for you in your practice. I wish you very, very well in your practice this week. Just to say that in a few weeks we're going to be doing a course called Life with Full Attention in 2 weeks on the 11th of June. So that's an opportunity for you to make a commitment over 8 weeks to doing the course. It'll be done by Samudra Ghoshi here, who was just waving at the beginning of the class. And that is it's a really, really good course for helping you in lockdown, really working with your mind, setting up really helpful, supportive routines to do that. So you might want to join us. That will be on Zoom, but we're going to continue on YouTube in this class. And we're doing these classes, actually all of our events, we're doing on dana, what we call dana. It's a Buddhist word. It means generosity. So I'm really, really happy for us to be doing this. It seemed the most appropriate thing to be doing in lockdown, for us just to open out and try and reach out to help and support people do this crucial work of learning to work with your mind, learning to meditate. And us doing that on Dharna, I mean, that really, what we're always trying to do with all of our activities actually is invite people into a culture of generosity. The prevailing culture of the world is one of exchange. In a way, I've just been talking about that, haven't I? It's sort of more grabby, kind of what's in it, sort of a concern for what one's going to get, one's own happiness, all that sort of stuff. Well, what we're really doing, we're trying to invite people into a culture of generosity. So with these classes, we're giving them it, in the hope that they will help you. And in response, actually, we really need money to continue as a centre. So if you're able to give £3, £5, or if you're able to set up a standing order, then go to our website. There is also a donate in the description of this on this page. But you can follow in the chat our link to our website. Anything that you would give will go towards supporting more and more people to learn to work with them.